Welcome back to the deep dive. Really excited today. We've got some pretty incredible source material waiting for us.
We really do. We're looking at Chapter 11 from Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. It's called The Context of Our Character, Part 1.
And it asks, a fundamental question, doesn't it? Why do people we think of as honest sometimes cheat? What's going on there?
Exactly. What influences our honesty? It's something, most of us probably grapple with.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is to unpack what Ariely's research found, these kind of hidden forces shaping our decisions about being honest or not so honest. And it turns out it might not be what we typically assume.
Yeah, the source suggests it goes way beyond just, worrying about getting caught. And it's not just a few bad apples either.
Okay, let's dive in. What jumps out first?
Well, the source starts by setting the scale, giving us some perspective on dishonesty. Think about crime statistics.
Well,
What comes to mind first? Probably things like robbery, right?
Sure.
street crime.
Okay, so the source cites figures from 2004. The total cost of all reported robberies in the U.S., around $525 million.
Which sounds like a lot of money. $500 million.
It does. But then compare that to the estimated cost of employee theft and fraud. Same year. Any guesses?
More. Maybe double.
Try $600 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B. Over 1,000 times the cost of all robberies.
Wow, that's staggering.
It really is. And even if you lump together all street crime robbery, burglary, car theft, the whole lot, that was around $16 billion back then. Employee theft dwarfed it.
Okay, so employees theft alone was what, almost twice the market cap of GE at the time? That's huge.
Huge. I mean, it doesn't stop there. The source mentions insurance fraud, another $24 billion a year.
Yeah.
The IRS tax cap, so money owed but not paid, a whopping $350 billion annually.
Great.
Retail returns, including the fraudulent ones, $16 billion. It just keeps adding up.
And it's not just these big numbers, right? The source also mentions the everyday stuff.
Exactly. Like lobbyists finding ways to pay for junkets, doctors getting kickbacks, executives backdating stock options, things that might not make headlines like a bank robbery, but they're happening.
So you've got this massive financial drain from white-collar crime, from everyday dishonesty that just swamps the cost of street crime.
Which leads to this question the author apparently discussed over lunch. Why do we often judge these white-collar crimes less harshly, even though the financial damage is, astronomical compared to street crime?
That's a really good question. Does it suggest maybe there are different kinds of dishonesty at play?
That's exactly the idea the source explores. Maybe there are two types.
Okay, what are there?
Type 1 is like the classic calculating criminal, the person who thinks like an economist, basically.
How so?
They do a cost-benefit analysis. Robbing the gas station, okay, how much money is likely in the till? What's the chance of getting caught? What's the punishment if I do? Prison time, future earnings lost. It's a rational calculation.
Right, weighing the pros and cons, the risks and rewards. That makes sense for, a certain kind of criminal.
But the source argues there's this whole other category, type 2.
And that involves people like us.
Pretty much. People who genuinely see themselves as honest, good people. They wouldn't dream of robbing a bank, but maybe they take a few pens home from the office and, forget to bring them back.
Or grab an extra soda they didn't strictly pay for at an event.
Or inflate their expense report just a little bit, fudge the mileage, slightly exaggerate an insurance claim. Small stuff.
The kind of thing where maybe you'd tell yourself, oh, it's not really hurting anyone, or everyone does it.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like capital C cheating or capital S stealing in your own mind.
So the big question for the researchers then becomes, how common is this type 2 dishonesty? Would people who think they're honest actually cheat in an experiment if you gave them the chance?
And if they did, how much? Would they go all out or?
This brings us to the experiments, right? The ones done at Harvard, MIT, places like that.
Yes. Top universities. The setup was pretty simple. Participants got a worksheet with 50 multiple-choice questions. They had 15 minutes. And they got paid, I think it was 10 cents for every correct answer.
Okay, straightforward enough.
Yeah.
But how did they test the cheating?
They used different conditions. First, a control group. They just handed in their worksheet and their bubble sheet to the proctor. No way to cheat. Their average score was 32.6 correct answers.
Got it, baseline.
Then came the conditions where cheating was possible. In one, called self-check, participants transferred their answers onto a pre-marked bubble sheet where the correct answers were already filled in, like in gray bubbles.
Oh, so they could easily see the right answers as they transferred.
Right. And they submitted both their original worksheet and this new bubble sheet. So they had the opportunity to correct their mistakes, shall we say.
Okay, temptation introduced. What was next?
Next level, self-check plus shred worksheet. Same process, transfer answers to the pre-marked sheet, but then they put their original worksheet through a shredder.
Ah, destroying the evidence of their original answers.
Exactly. They only handed in the bubble sheet. So less risk of being directly contradicted.
Makes sense. Did they ramp it up even more?
Oh yeah, the final condition. Self-check plus shred both plus money jar, transfer answers, then shred both the original worksheet and the bubble sheet.
So no paper trail at all.
None. They just walked up to the front, stated how many they got right, and took the appropriate amount of money out of a big jar of cash. Maximum opportunity, minimal apparent risk.
Okay, so think about this if you're listening. You've got these smart students at elite schools. What do you predict happened? Did they cheat when they could?
And if they did they cheat more when they could shred the evidence? Did they go for broke when they could just take the money from the jar?
The actual results, the source says, were really quite surprising.
They really were. Okay, remember, the control group averaged 32.6 correct in the self-check condition, where they saw the answers while transferring.
What did they claim?
They claimed an average of 36.2 correct.
Okay, so that's about 3.6 questions higher than the control. They definitely cheated.
They cheated. Not by a huge amount, but yes. Now, what about when they could shred the original worksheet? Less evidence. Did cheating go up?
Logically, you'd think so.
Logically, yes.
Yeah.
But the claimed average was 35.9 correct.
Wait, that's slightly less. Basically the same amount of cheating.
Exactly. Virtually identical. Now for the grand finale. Shredding everything, just taking the money from the jar. Maximum temptation, zero risk of paper evidence.
Surely that made them cheat more.
Claimed average, 36.1 correct.
Still the same. About 3.5 extra questions.
Pretty much the same level of cheating across all conditions where cheating was possible.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. What are the big takeaways here?
Well, first, it wasn't just a few bad apples. When given the chance, lots of these supposedly honest students cheated.
Okay, widespread cheating. But
Second, they cheated just a little bit. They could have easily claimed 40, 45, even 50 correct, especially in the shredding conditions. But they didn't. They boosted their scores by a few points, not massively.
and the third point, which kind of blows up the simple cost-benefit idea.
Right. The amount of cheating didn't increase as the risk of getting caught went down. Shredding the evidence made no difference to how much they cheated.
So this really suggests that the decision to cheat or how much to cheat isn't just about what can I get away with.
Exactly. That simple model of the calculating crook weighing the odds just doesn't seem to fit this data. Something else is going on. Something is holding people back from maximum dishonesty, even when the external risk is gone.
So what could that something else be? The source delves into some theories, right? Starting with Adam Smith.
Yeah, the classical economics viewpoint. Smith suggested basically that honesty is good policy because it helps your reputation, makes people trust you, and ultimately benefits you socially and economically. It's rational self-interest, in a way.
Be honest because it pays off in the long run.
Right. But as this source points out, if it's purely about rational calculation and reputation, why didn't the students cheat more when they shredded the evidence? The immediate payoff was high, the risk was near zero. Smith's view doesn't fully explain that restraint.
And the source uses that laptop example, right? It's easy to imagine doing a cost-benefit for buying one, but not for stealing one for most people.
Exactly. There seems to be an internal barrier for most of us against major dishonesty, regardless of the external calculation, which leads to the psychological perspective, pulling from Freud.
Ah, the superego. How does that fit in?
Well, the idea, as presented in the source, is that as we grow up, we internalize society's rules and values. This forms the superego, which acts like an internal moral compass or judge.
Okay.
It makes us feel good when we act according to our internalized ethics. The source mentions feeling good about stopping at a red light late at night or returning a lost wallet. It activates reward centers. And it makes us feel bad, guilty, or uncomfortable when we violate those ethics or even think about violating them.
So how does this internal judge explain the cheating results? People cheated, but only a little.
Here's the theory proposed in the source. Maybe the superego, our internal honesty monitor, is really sensitive to big transgressions. Stealing the whole box of pens, claiming 50 out of 50 correct, robbing the bank, those things scream dishonest person, and the superego alarm bells go off loudly. It conflicts too much with our self-image.
But for the small stuff, taking just one pen, inflating the score by just 3 points.
The source suggests that for these little dishonesties, the superego might kind of stay asleep. It doesn't register them as a major threat to our self-concept of being a basically good, honest person. We can rationalize them away more easily.
So we can sneak these small cheats past our internal monitor.
That seems to be the idea. And if the superego isn't actively policing these small acts, and the experiments show the external risk of getting caught doesn't really affect the amount of cheating.
There's not much holding us back from cheating, just that little bit.
Exactly. We cheat up to a certain point, at the point where it still feels kind of okay, where we don't have to fundamentally revise our self-image. We get a bit of benefit without triggering that internal guilt mechanism too strongly.
This starts to sound a bit troubling when you think about the real world. The source mentions you barely need to open a newspaper.
Right. It seems like examples of dishonesty, big and small, are everywhere. Credit card practices, pension funds, schools making deals with soda companies, the whole tax system.
And society tries to clamp down with rules and regulations.
What?
Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, after the Enron scandals, rules for lobbyists.
Yeah, attempts at external control. But the source gives these almost comical examples of how easily those rules get skirted. Lobbyists couldn't buy a sit-down meal? Fine. They'd host receptions with fancy finger food, the toothpick rule.
Or fly politicians in helicopters instead of private jets because the rule only mentioned fixed-wing aircraft.
Precisely. It shows a lot of creativity in, well, bending the rules, not necessarily embracing the spirit of honesty.
And the source suggests these external fixes aren't enough, especially if there's a deeper erosion of ethics happening.
That's a major point. It cites studies showing a decline in professionalism, like among lawyers who felt economic pressures were making them less ethical, and that their own bar associations weren't doing enough to punish bad behavior.
The descriptions were pretty harsh, money-grabbing, sneaky, tricky.
They were. And it wasn't just lawyers. Similar concerns were raised about doctors performing unnecessary procedures or getting kickbacks, geologists using questionable data. It's presented as a widespread issue across professions.
Even ethicists themselves, the source mentions, feel the pressure sometimes.
Right, this idea that things often fall into shades of gray. The source links this decline partly to a shift away from strong professional codes towards more market-driven norms since the 60s.
So, if external rules have limited effect and internal ethics seem to be weakening in some areas, what's the alternative? Is there a better way to encourage honesty, maybe something that wakes up that sleepy superego?
This is where the next set of experiments in the source are really illuminating. They tested the power of moral reminders, getting people to think about ethics right before the temptation.
Okay, like the Ten Commandments experiment. How did that work?
Simple math task again, chance to cheat for payment. Before they started, one group had to recall 10 books they read in high school, just a memory task. The other group had to try and recall as many of the 10 commandments as they could.
And what happened?
The control group, no cheating possible, got about 3.1 problems right. The group that recalled books and could cheat, they claimed 4.1 correct. So they cheated.
Standard result so far. What about the Ten Commandments group?
The group that thought about the 10 commandments, even if they couldn't remember them all and then had the chance to cheat, they claimed an average of 3.0 correct.
No cheating at all.
0, nada. Just thinking about a moral code, even for people who aren't necessarily religious or couldn't list all 10, seemed to completely eliminate the dishonesty.
That's amazing. It wasn't about knowing the rules, but just contemplating morality.
That seems to be the implication. It switched on that internal monitor. And there was another experiment like this, the MIT Honor Code one.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Similar setup math task. Chance to cheat by pocketing your answer sheet and self-reporting your score. Control group handed papers in. Cheating group just pocketed answers. But a third group, before starting, had to sign a statement at the top of the page.
What did the statement say?
Something simple like, I understand that this study falls under the MIT honor system. Then they also pocketed their answers.
Okay. And the results.
Control group averaged 3 correct. The group that just pocketed their answers, the standard cheating group, claimed 5.5 correct. Significant cheating.
And the group that signed the honor code statement first?
They claimed 3 correct.
Again, 0 cheating. Even though, as the source notes, MIT doesn't actually have an honor code.
Correct. Just signing that statement, invoking the idea of an honor code, was enough to make them completely honest.
Wow. The power of a simple, timely reminder. It's incredibly powerful. It suggests that activating that sense of morality, right at the point of temptation, can be far more effective than just relying on the fear of getting caught later.
Okay, let's try to pull all these threads together. What are the key conclusions from Airley's research here?
I think there are three really big ones that stand out from the source.
Hmm.
First, lots of us cheat when we get the chance, but usually only by a small amount.
We're not all saints, but we're not usually master criminals either.
Right. Second, counterintuitively, the actual risk of getting caught seems to have surprisingly little impact on how much we cheat in these small ways.
Which challenges that purely rational cost-benefit model.
Definitely. And third, the really helpful part. Simply thinking about morality or being reminded of ethical standards, religious or secular, like an honor code right before temptation strikes, can basically eliminate this kind of cheating completely.
It wakes up the superego, even for the small stuff. It seems so. That internal context, primed at the right moment, is incredibly powerful. Though the source does caution that, one-off oaths probably aren't enough, the reminder needs to be close to the action.
And this isn't just lab stuff, is it? It has huge real-world implications regarding trust in society.
Absolutely. The source mentions the drop in the U.S. integrity ranking after corporate scandals, suggesting this stuff matters on a national scale. It talks about a slippery slope.
And contrasts it with societies where low trust really hampers everything. The examples from China, Latin America, Iran, where business slows down, relies only on family because you can't trust strangers.
It paints a picture of what happens when that basic platform of honesty erodes. No credit, no paying in advance, limited risk-taking. Everything becomes more difficult and expensive.
And the source puts it to you, the listener. Is that the kind of world you want to live in? It really makes you think about the collective cost of lots of small dishonesties.
It does. So if external rules are leaky and our internal monitors need prompting, what are the practical takeaways? What can actually be done?
Well, the source suggests things based directly on the findings. On an individual level, consciously taking a moment to recall your own values, maybe.
For organizations and professions trying to genuinely revive and emphasize professional standards and oaths, making them meaningful again.
And using those simple, timely, secular reminders, like signing an integrity statement before filling out an expense report, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. But maybe the biggest takeaway is recognizing our own psychological vulnerability. We are all, the source argues, prone to this bending reality. When our self-interest clashes with ethics, we naturally see things in a way that favors us.
That tendency to rationalize the small cheat.
Exactly. And because we know we have this bias, this predictable irrationality, perhaps the most effective strategy, systemically, is to try and design away the temptation.
How so?
By avoiding conflicts of interest. Prohibit doctors from profiting directly from the tests they order. Stop accounting firms from both auditing and consulting for the same client. Don't let politicians set their own salaries. Remove the situation where personal gain directly fights ethical standards.
Change the context, change the environment, because changing fundamental human nature is hard.
That seems to be the core message. It's been a really fascinating deep dive into why we're dishonest sometimes, and it's not nearly as simple as we might think.
It really hasn't. It makes you reflect on your own little moments, doesn't it? So for everyone listening, how can you be more mindful of those situations where maybe your own benefit tempts you to bend things just a little? What small step could you take to activate your own internal reminder before you act?
And this is just part of this chapter in Ariely's book. There's more. Chapter 12 apparently digs into other factors.
Oh, like what?
Specifically, he explores how dealing with actual cash versus non-monetary things like tokens or supplies affects our honesty. Does handling cold, hard cash make us behave differently?
Ooh, that sounds really interesting, building right on this. Does the distance from money change things?
Looks like we'll have to find out. There's definitely more to explore about the context of our character.
Fantastic. Well, we hope you'll join us next time as we continue the deep dive.